Good day, everybody. I'm Dr. Graham Dean. I'm the course leader for psychology at Norwich University of the Arts. Now, you're probably here because like me, you're fascinated by psychology. For me, it's the ultimate applied subject. It's about how we think, how we behave the way we do. We're interested in what can make us perform better, how we can interact with other people, how we can improve our learning, and psychology can also give us insights into how we can improve our skills. Now, psychology at Norwich University of the Arts is a new degree course. We're running it from September 2025, and the course has been specifically designed to meet British Psychological Society accreditation requirements. And we're going to be applying for accreditation in the first year of operation. That's the BPS rules. It's not that we can't apply for accreditation earlier. The BPS says you can only apply for accreditation once the course is up and running. But I'm fairly confident that we will get accredited as we've designed the course to meet the accreditation requirements. So psychology, there are a lot of misunderstandings about what psychology is. And the most common misunderstanding is that there are hidden depths to the mind. Now, our behavior is not open to introspection. The reasons we behave is often not open to introspection. But what we do understand in modern psychology is that our behavior is a combination of several factors. And because it's a combination of these factors, you end up getting very complex behaviors from simple operations. And this is one of the reasons the BPS require that we cover the core areas: cognitive, biological, social, individual differences, lifespan development. All these areas combine to produce our behavior, to produce our sense of self. And there are two other areas the BPS require for accreditation. One is research methods. Modern psychology is all about forming a research question, collecting data, and then analysing that data to produce conclusions. And the other core area that the BPS require is historical and conceptual issues. Now, psychology has a deep, dark history, and along the way in creating our subject, we've made lots of mistakes and we learn from those mistakes. So the BPS require that we study historical and conceptual issues to understand how psychology has arrived at its current state of being. So to give some more details about the kinds of things we study, I'm a cognitive psychologist. Now, you can view cognitive psychology in terms of the topic areas, things like perception, memory, problem solving, language processing, how we think and how we reason. But you can also view cognitive psychology in terms of information processing. There's information in the external world that impinges on our senses, say pressure sensors in the skin, and this is transduced into nerve impulses, and the only way information is recorded is in the frequency of those nerve impulses, and these are all processed in the brain and the central nervous system, and then we produce a response. But viewing psychology purely in information processing terms can be a little bit sterile and unidimensional. And so we also have to consider biological processes. All that information processing takes place in our brains and our central nervous systems. And the structure of our brain and central nervous system and the networks that are formed influences how this information is processed. Also influencing how the information is processed is the fact that our nervous system is awash with hormones and neurotransmitters. Now, social psychology is all about how we interact with others, how we interact with groups, interpersonal and intrapersonal behavior. It's what makes us human, how we interact with our community. But how we interact is influenced by cognitive and biological processes. Much of our behavior tends to be situational. We're either reacting to events in the external world or situations that we have created or set up to occur. Individual differences, it goes without saying, everybody differs, but we can gain great insight into psychological functioning by looking at how individuals differ. Now, individual differences is also a research method in psychology where you try to get insights from observing patterns in behavior across the population, and also looking at neurodivergent psychology, where divergence from the norm can give great insights into what the norm actually is. Final area of topic in the BPS curriculum is lifespan development. Now, this is important because it involves how we learn and change over our lifespan. So if we're looking at infancy and early childhood, we're looking at how the cognitive structures and long-term memories are formed by the way we interact with the world. If we're looking at adolescence or middle age or old age or even senescence, then we're looking at how the system changes in response to even more learning or the degradation of our biological systems. Now, lifespan development is also important because it concerns our sense of self. Now, our sense of self is what makes us us. We think it's fairly constant. If we think back 10 years or 20 years, we'll say that essentially we're the same person. But what we know from longitudinal studies is that our sense of self changes over time. And this reveals one of the aspects of cognitive psychology that is very important, in that every time we remember something, we're remembering the last time we remembered it, for the simple reason that our memories are retrieved and then they're relayed down, re-encoded after the retrieval. So they'll change incrementally, but we won't realize that incremental change has happened. So to us, our sense of self is fairly permanent. It's what identifies us, but in reality, our sense of self is changing over time, considering how we interact with our environment and our social environment and our cognitive and biological status. Now, research methods are the most important part of psychology. Psychology is a science, and we gain new information by forming research questions and designing studies and collecting data to answer those research questions. So the BPS insists that an accredited degree has a very strong research methods element to it. And you also need knowledge of research methods to understand research that people have previously done in psychology. So research methods will be a constant theme that run through the 3 years of the psychology degree. Historical and conceptual issues, as I mentioned, psychology has a very deep and dark history. The way we measure things, the way we categorize things, what we consider important to be measured, has often fed into discrimination, selection, and exclusion. And we have to understand, have a historical sense of the mistakes of the past so that we don't repeat them for the future. So, to give you some examples of psychology applied to everyday life. Now, psychology, as I said, is the ultimate applied subject. It fascinates me. And the example I'm going to use today is the push-pull door handle. I'm sure you've all encountered a situation where the door, you push on the door handle when you should be pulling. And this is because the cues the door handle give are different to your learned experience. Now, the reason we rely on learned experience is that our information processing capacity is very limited. Although we can solve novel problems, and indeed one of the things we claim makes us unique as human beings is that we're problem-solving animals, we don't spend our life looking at every situation thinking, how do I solve that problem? We rely on learned knowledge, acquired knowledge, and knowledge structures. And in the external world, there is information embedded in design. So if you're designing an object, you want to embed information in the design so it's intuitive to use. And if you have good design, then it reduces the demands on our limited cognitive resources. We don't want to stand at a door and think, do we pull, do we push, or how do we operate this door? So in everyday life, we rely on this external information in the external world. But what happens here is that we're cued to pull. When we see a handle, we tend to pull it. And if you have a handle that says push, which has the cue to pull, you're going to be misled. And most of us have been caught out by this probably hundreds of times over our life. We never really learn, but that's because most handles that extend outwards have a pull function, and we will always rely on this external information to make our decision. So that's an example of how cognition interacts with everyday life, but it's not the entire story of psychology. I'll give you an example here of how emotion interacts with cognition. Now, this juice squeezer is very different from the one I use every day. The one I use every day has is pressed glass, it's functional, and it does the job. But this one, I purchased this one because it looks like a spaceship. I'm absolutely delighted by my juice squeezer. But I made the decision to purchase it because for emotional reasons. It wasn't cognitive. Oh, this does the task. This is a perfectly functional tool. I made the decision because this is because I was emotionally attracted to this design. Now, emotion is a biological thing, and this is an instance of how emotion can feed into my decision making. It could have also had social influences. I could have purchased this juice squeezer to put it on the table in my room and people talk about it when they come and visit me. That's not the reason, but it could be a reason. And the reason I purchased it could also be because it enhances my sense of identity. It could be that I get my sense of identity from buying things or buying wonderfully designed things. And this would be a sense of where lifespan development feeds into my decision making and my reasons for doing things. So why we do things can be often simple in its explanation. In my case, an emotional reaction to a design, but it can appear very complex after all these simple decisions are considered and interact. So that's an example of how emotion interacts with cognition. So you want to be knowing about your career prospects as a psychologist. So if you get graduate basis for chartership, you'll be eligible to study psychology at a higher level. Now, all specialist psychology study and practice requires either a master's or a taught PhD. There is no easy career route in psychology. An undergraduate degree will merely qualify you to study psychology at master's level. Now, this is the reason we've designed the degree course to meet BPS accreditation standards, it's rather important. But if you do our degree and get graduate basis for chartership, then you'll be able to go on to further study things like forensic, educational psychology, health psychology, occupational psychology, clinical psychology. They all require a further degree and then continual professional development under the supervision of the BPS or the guidance of the BPS. About 60, maybe 65% of psychology graduates go on to further degrees in psychology. Other graduate destinations, things like teaching and HR, also require further specialist master's training. And but the the thing about this further training is they don't require graduate basis for chartership. So they're the career prospects of psychology graduates. I would say 95% of psychology graduates go on to graduate-based employment. That's the data I'm aware of. So how do we teach and assess on the psychology degree at Norwich University? Now, the purpose of educating people is to get them to build knowledge structures in their heads. In the case of psychology, content is king because you have to know and understand all these different areas of psychology and how they can react to form human behavior. So facts are important. They're the foundations and the scaffold ties of our knowledge structures. But how we get the facts into the students' heads and our own heads is driven by the activities we do. Now, we've made a very conscious choice here at Norwich to not test knowledge by exams. It drives the wrong kind of student learning. So, for example, if you're cramming for exam, you might remember all those facts and details just for a couple of weeks after the exam, but they don't go to form long-term knowledge structures. The way you form long-term knowledge structures is by actively using information to do something. And so we've applied this concept of learning through applying knowledge into the ethos of Norwich University of the Arts project assessment. We're going to do research practicals that investigate specific areas, and you have to write them up. Writing up research practicals, writing formal reports in psychology is a requirement, a skill that is required for BPS accreditation. So we've taken this and we've taken the ethos of Norwich University of the Arts in project-based assessment, and we've taken the ethos of the BPS who think that students should be exposed to research methods throughout their degree course, and we've combined them to have an assessment spiral where you form research questions, you collect data, you analyze that data, you report your findings, and that's going to be the assessment. Out of necessity, we also have some portfolio assessment. This does not require you to write 10,000 words. It's mainly seminar exercises that you start in the seminars and continue in your own time. And there'll be things like designing a mental health leaflet. How do you apply psychological principles to the layout and the information contained in the health leaflet? And there'll be seminar exercises on using particular statistical tests, and we will combine those to produce a portfolio that is evidence that you've done the work required to build the knowledge structures inside your head. So no exams at present and learning through applying knowledge. That's our model of assessment at Norwich University of the Arts. So to give you an example of some research practicals, these are not exhaustive. I've just taken two examples to enable you to have an idea of the different areas of research. So we could have a practical on interface design. Now, how you design the perfect interface is two bigger research question to answer in one go. And you have to split these big research questions into smaller research questions, and that is a skill in itself. So it might be that we concentrate on interface design by asking smaller questions about how do we organize the elements of an interface, or what should these elements be, icons or menus. So smaller research questions, and then we'll design an experiment to test this. So for example, we might look at different types of icons, how effective they are, and how salient they are to people's perception. We might look at how you organize menu items. Do you nest them like in the example above, or do you have a giant long menu? Which is easier for people to find things in? So we could design an experiment testing 2 or 3 alternatives. We could collect data on things like response times or reaction times, and then we could answer our question, which was the most efficient, which option on average was the most efficient for people to use. So that's an example of a quantitative practical. We're observing behavior, we're reducing it to numbers, and we're making judgments about those numbers. Our second example is an example of qualitative research. Now, you can't always reduce human behavior to numbers, or if you do, you can distort that behavior. So what we might want to do is ask about the experience of healthcare users. This is a good example because healthcare providers often think in terms of their valuable time, appointments. Why don't our patients turn up to appointments? So we might do a study investigating why people miss appointments. So we could design the system to respond to their needs better. Now, you could ask have a questionnaire if you knew what questions to answer. So one of the purposes of qualitative research is to get at the things that are important to individuals, their phenomenological experience, what in their mind influences their behavior. And we can't do this by just asking questions of people and getting a rating on a 5-point Likert scale from 1 not at all to 5 very frequently. What we'd do is we'd interview the participants and transcribe those interviews and try and identify themes in the interviews to spot what the salient issues were. So it's not about sitting there asking questions of an individual. You might prompt them with questions, but it's about having a conversation with an individual to understand what motivates them or what they think motivates them. And again, this is in the spirit of asking a research question, designing a method of collecting data, analyzing that data, and then reporting that data. So why would you want to study at Norwich University of the Arts? First of all, we teach psychology in the context of a University of Creative Arts. We employ project-based learning, and we've designed the course to enable you to experience the full range of psychology. So we'll be using examples from interface design we've already used, health psychology, clinical psychology, forensic psychology, wherever psychology is used, especially educational psychology and art and design, to illuminate how all these different processes in psychology combine to produce complex behavior. So in line with the ethos of BPS accreditation, we're going to give you the foundations of knowledge and we'll give you the opportunity. The direction you develop your knowledge in is entirely up to you. So thank you for listening to me. I look forward to seeing you an open day if you can attend. And if you have any questions, you can mail them to the recruitment team and I'll do my best to answer them for you. So thank you for listening to me. I hope you decide to apply to Norwich University of the Arts.